I used to listen to the wind, not for messages, not for magic, just because it was there. It was soft, present, honest. And back then, I needed something honest. I didn't tell anyone, not my parents, not my friends. No one knew how heavy my silence was. But the wind, it sat beside me anyway. It brushed against my skin like it understood. It never asked me to explain, never tried to fix me. It just stayed. And somehow that was enough. Years passed. I forgot, not on purpose, just slowly, quietly. I let go of the things that once held me. Deadlines, noise, people, screens. They filled the space where the wind used to be. And I told myself this is what growing up feels like. Losing softness, losing stillness, losing something. I didn't notice how far I had walked from the trees, how long it had been since I looked up at the sky, how much I missed the sound of leaves dancing. Until one day when everything felt too loud and I couldn't breathe, I stepped outside, not to find peace and not even to think, just to escape. And there it was again. The wind, like an old friend, like it never left, like it had been waiting for me to remember. I stood still, and for the first time in years, I felt held. Not by a person, not by a word, but by something older than pain and softer than forgiveness. That's when I knew. Healing doesn't always speak. Sometimes it whispers through trees. It hums through birdsong. It lingers in sunlight. And sometimes when you're quiet enough, it finds you again. I started noticing things again. The way sunlight filters through leaves, like stained glass on skin. The way the ground smells different after rain, like the earth just took a deep breath. The sound of birds not singing for me, just singing because they exist. For years, I thought I needed someone to see me, to ask me, to rescue me from myself. But the wind never asked. The trees never interrupted. The sky never judged. They didn't tell me to move on. They didn't demand I explain my sadness. They just kept showing up. And maybe that's what I needed all along. Something that stayed, even when I couldn't. Somewhere in the silence, I found a kind of truth I never found in words. Nature didn't fix me. It didn't erase the grief, but it reminded me that I still belonged. Even in pain, even when I was tired of trying, even when I forgot myself. It held space for the parts of me I had abandoned. And that kind of love, the kind that doesn't ask, doesn't force, just exists, that's the kind that heals slowly, but fully. I never wrote about this before, never said it aloud. Because who would understand that my greatest comfort came not from people, but from a tree I used to pass on the way home? Or that some days the only thing keeping me together was the shape of clouds drifting across a quiet sky. But today I speak it, not to be understood, not to be validated, just to remember. Because I don't want to forget again. I don't want to lose that part of me who still believes the wind can listen and the sky can hold me. This story isn't loud, it's not urgent, it won't go viral. But maybe it will land softly in someone's chest like a leaf floating down at the exact right moment. Maybe you've forgotten too. Maybe you're tired. Maybe you're searching for something without even knowing what it is. Maybe this is your reminder. Go outside. Find a tree, sit, breathe. You don't need to explain. You don't need to do anything. Just be, and let the wind do the rest. I remember the first time the wind held me. It wasn't dramatic. There was no storm, no whirlwind of leaves dancing in poetry, just a quiet afternoon and a child trying not to cry. I was 10, sitting on the stone steps behind our old house. The sun was somewhere behind the clouds, muted, like it didn't want to interfere with what was happening on earth. I had just been told again that I was too sensitive, too quiet, too strange, too much, or maybe not enough. So I hid outside in silence. My knees were pulled close to my chest, my chin resting on them, my eyes stinging but dry, because crying would mean I hadn't listened. And then the wind came. I didn't expect it. I wasn't waiting for anything, but it showed up anyway, gentle, curious kind. It touched my face lightly as if asking permission. It slipped through the small spaces between my arms, moved the strands of hair stuck to my skin as if to say, I see you even if no one else does. That was the first time I realized comfort didn't need words. It didn't need explanations or justifications or apologies. Sometimes comfort just comes quietly, sits beside you, and asks for nothing. After that day, I started noticing the wind more, how it came before the rain, how it played with the laundry on the line, how it sometimes carried laughter from houses I had never entered. Years went by and I forgot. I grew taller, quieter, more careful, less myself. The world became a place of expectations, of instructions, of noise that didn't care about softness. I started to believe that healing came from achievement, from being understood, from fixing everything wrong inside me. And still on the days when everything felt too loud, too sharp, too tight, the wind would find me. Not in grand gestures, but in passing. A breeze at the bus stop, a sudden gust in the hallway, a gentle movement of air as I sat alone in my room trying to keep it together. I never told anyone how I waited for it sometimes. How I would open a window not for the view, but for a chance to feel something familiar, something honest. When I was 16, I failed something important. Something adults told me would decide my future. I sat on the back porch again, but this time the house was different. The paint chipped, the people busier, the silence heavier. I didn't cry, I just looked at the sky waiting, and once again the wind came. It didn't congratulate or console. It didn't give advice. It just moved through the space between my fingers like it had always done. Like it remembered me even if I had stopped remembering myself. And I breathed for the first time that week, really breathed. That became a pattern every few years. When something fell apart, when someone left, when I forgot who I was supposed to be, the wind would arrive uninvited but never unwelcome. Sometimes it showed up in the middle of sleepless nights through cracks in old window frames. Sometimes on long walks after painful conversations or hospital visits or funerals. Always there but never demanding. It taught me something without words, that maybe we don't always need to be rescued. Maybe we just need to be accompanied. Not solved, not fixed, just seen and felt. And the wind was very good at that. Once when I was in my 30s, I walked out of a job I thought I'd stay in forever. My chest was heavy, but I couldn't explain why. I sat on a bench under an old oak tree in a park I used to pass but never entered. The city moved around me fast, indifferent. And then the wind circled me, like it had waited all morning. It lifted the hair from my shoulders, moved across my back, settled at my feet, and stayed. I didn't feel strong. I didn't feel wise, but I felt real, and that was enough. It's strange how something you cannot hold can be the thing that holds you. In my 50s, I started walking more slowly, not because of age, but because I finally wanted to notice things again. And the wind was still there, older, but just as gentle. I began to talk to it quietly under my breath. Not expecting answers, just grateful for its company. I would whisper thank you when no one else had stayed, and it would pass by as if to say, I know. Even now, as I sit here speaking this memory aloud, the curtains shift slightly and I smile. Because I know it's listening still. Of all the things I've forgotten, passwords, names, appointments, I never forget the feeling of that first afternoon, the way the wind chose to stay. And I hope whoever you are, wherever you are, that when you feel most alone, something soft will come find you. Not to fix, not to speak, just to stay, like the wind stayed with me. I never used to think much about sunlight. It was just there in the morning, on the floor, through the window, on my skin. It meant the day had started, that I should get up, get dressed, get going. But I never really looked at it. Not until the morning after I lost her. That morning, the world didn't feel like it had changed. People were still driving, dogs were still barking, the mail still arrived. But everything inside me was broken, and I expected the sky to notice. It didn't. The light came in anyway, same as always, unbothered, unaware, or maybe just unwilling to leave me in the dark. It landed on my pillow, soft, quiet, gentle, and I hated it for a moment. Because how could it shine when everything in me was so dim? But it stayed, not with force, not with urgency, just with presence. And eventually I turned my face toward it. That small motion, that small act of surrender, it did something to me. It didn't heal me, but it reminded me I was still alive. In the days that followed, when I couldn't talk to anyone, when everything sounded empty, I started to sit by the window, not to think, just to be. And the light came in every single day without skipping, without judging, without changing its rhythm for my grief. There was something sacred in that. The way sunlight didn't ask me to be okay, didn't ask me to smile, didn't ask me anything at all. It just touched my hands, warmed my knees, rested on my chest as if to say, "You are not gone." That was the first time I noticed its kindness. And once I saw it, I couldn't unsee it. The way it danced through dust as if turning old particles into something holy. The way it wrapped itself around trees like an embrace from above. The way it spilled over old fences into forgotten corners, places people had abandoned, but the light never did. I started walking more in the mornings, not far, not fast, just enough to feel the warmth move with me. Sometimes it felt like company, like someone was walking beside me quietly with no intention of fixing me, just sharing the road. And on those walks, I remembered things. Like how my grandmother used to dry her hair in the sun, how she would tilt her head back, eyes closed, saying it made her feel clean from the inside out. Or how my father on rare soft days would read by the window, letting the light turn each page like a whisper. There were good things buried under all the noise of memory. And it was the light that helped me find them again. It's strange how we forget the most faithful things. Sunlight that arrives each morning, no matter who we are, no matter what we've lost, no matter how much we ache. It shows up, even when we don't, even when we can't. And sometimes that's all we need. Someone or something that keeps showing up. Not because we deserve it, not because we earned it, but simply because it is what it is. I've had many dark seasons in my life, times when the walls felt closer, when even breathing felt like a task. But even then, through closed curtains, through the smallest crack in the blinds, light would find me. It was patient, it waited, it didn't knock, it didn't demand. It just remained. And slowly in its presence, I softened. My shoulders dropped, my jaw loosened, my heart opened just a little. Not because I was ready, but because the light never asked me to be. It just kept arriving until I let it in. There's something holy about that kind of consistency, the kind that doesn't depend on mood or worth or outcome. It just is. Sunlight doesn't perform, it doesn't prove, it doesn't persuade. It just shows up again and again and again. And I wonder how many people right now are sitting in dark rooms thinking no one sees them, no one hears them, no one cares. And I wish I could tell them to look at the light. Even if it's small, even if it's filtered, even if it only touches one corner of the room, because that is enough. It doesn't need to flood you. It doesn't need to blind you. It just needs to remind you that warmth is still possible. And sometimes when you are ready or not ready, you can turn your face toward it. Let it rest on your skin. Let it sit on your palms. Let it fill your silence without needing to be anything else. Some days I still forget. I pull the curtains tight, I bury myself in worry, I lose the softness. But the light still comes. It still brushes against the edges of my closed world, waiting for the moment I might look again. And when I do, it feels like a homecoming, a silent welcome, a quiet truth. You are still here, and so am I. No matter how heavy the night the sun returns. Not loudly, not with applause, just with presence. And maybe that's the kind of healing that lasts, not the kind that fixes everything, but the kind that by simply showing up reminds you you are not beyond light. There was a tree behind the house I grew up in. Tall, silent, ordinary. No one paid it much attention. It wasn't a tree that bloomed flowers or gave fruit or looked particularly beautiful, but it stood. Through all seasons, through all storms, through all the years I lived there, and long after I left. I didn't think of it as special, not at first. It was just there in the background, like a piece of furniture the earth forgot to move. Until one day after a fight, I don't even remember the words of I ran outside, not to make a point but to breathe. And I ended up under that tree. I sat with my back against it, not expecting anything, not needing anything, just needing to stop. And it did something I didn't know I needed. It didn't move, didn't speak, didn't ask. It just stayed, was very student, and that was the beginning of what I now know was a friendship. Every time the world became too much, when voices were too loud, when expectations pressed too hard, when I felt invisible or wrong or broken, I went back to that tree. Sometimes I stood beside it. Sometimes I sat at its base. Sometimes I said things out loud just to get them out. It never responded, never gave advice, never nodded, never promised it would be okay. But it stayed, and that was enough. There is something sacred about a living thing that doesn't run from your sadness, that doesn't try to reshape your grief or lighten your story, that just listens without ears, without ego. That tree watched me grow, watched me cry, watched me try to become someone I wasn't, and later watched me slowly come back to myself. I remember once I carved my initials into its bark, not out of rebellion, but out of longing to be remembered by something, to belong somewhere. The scar is probably still there. Years later, I visited the neighborhood again. The house was painted a different color. The fence was new, but the tree still stood. A little more weathered, a little taller, but still silent, still whole. I touched its bark, closed my eyes, and for a moment, I was 15 again. And I realized this tree knew things about me no one else did. It knew how long I had stayed silent. It knew how often I came just to sit. It knew the version of me that existed before the world taught me to pretend. And it never asked me to be anything else. There have been other trees since then. The one outside my college dorm where I cried after failing my first exam. The one at the park where I walked after losing my job, hands in pockets, wondering if I had lost myself too. The one in the hospital courtyard where I sat the day my father stopped speaking. They all had different shapes, different leaves, different cities. But they all shared the same stillness. The same quiet, unmoving, unjudging presence. People talk a lot about roots, about grounding, about finding stability. But sometimes you don't need to be rooted yourself. You just need to be near something that is. A tree doesn't rush, doesn't compete, doesn't explain. It grows in its time, in its way, without apology. And being near that when your life feels like chaos is healing. Because trees teach you without saying a word that it's okay to stand still, that it's okay to take time, that bending is not breaking, that changing with the seasons is not failure, but life. I remember hugging a tree once on a trail far from home. I had been holding in tears for weeks, trying to be strong, trying to be fine. But that day something broke. And I wrapped my arms around that trunk, pressing my face against the bark, and I cried without sound, without shame. And the tree stood. It didn't recoil, didn't tighten, didn't try to leave. It simply remained. That moment, as odd as it may seem, is one of the safest I've ever felt. Because I wasn't judged, I wasn't fixed, I was simply allowed. Allowed to feel, allowed to fall apart, allowed to exist. Now, when people ask me where I go to feel okay, to reset, to breathe, I say somewhere with trees. Not because I believe they hold magic, but because they remind me that being quiet and present is enough. That I don't have to bloom all the time. That growing slowly is still growing. That being still is not being stuck. There is a tree outside my window today, smaller than the one from my childhood, but still steady. And some mornings when I wake up tired or unsure, I look at it. And it looks back. Not literally, of course, but in the way trees do. By simply being, by not turning away. And I remember that I am not the only one trying to stand tall in a world that pulls in all directions. I remember that there is strength in stillness, and that maybe, just maybe, I'm doing better than I think. I never understood why birds sang so early. Before the light, before the warmth, before anyone else was awake. It felt unnecessary, almost out of place. Why sing when the world is still half asleep, when no one is listening, when everything is still covered in shadow? I used to wonder if they were trying to wake the sun or maybe just themselves. But now I think they sing because they can. Because it is their nature, because no one told them not to. And because sometimes joy doesn't wait for permission. When I was younger, their song was background noise, something I heard without really hearing. But during one of the loneliest chapters of my life, the birds became something else. I was waking up at strange hours, not because I wanted to, but because sleep had become a stranger. My thoughts had grown louder at night and heavier by morning. And in those quiet moments between night and day, I heard them. Soft, gentle, steady. Not just one, but many layered together like a quiet choir. They didn't seem to mind the silence around them or the sadness inside me. They just sang without expectation, without a need for applause, without knowing who was listening. And somehow that gave me permission to stay alive. It's a strange thing to feel less alone because of a bird. But I did. Their songs felt like a thread pulling me back each morning to something simple, something true. The first time I truly noticed was after a week of silence, not from the world, but from me. I had stopped reaching out, stopped replying, stopped pretending I was okay. And then one morning, sitting by the window, hands wrapped around a cup I hadn't touched, I heard them. Clear, confident, soft as breath. And I cried. Not because of the sound, but because something in it said you're still here. You haven't disappeared. You're still part of the world, even if it doesn't feel like it right now. Birdsong is not loud. It doesn't push. It doesn't preach. It just fills the space like light does, like wind does, like grace does. It reminds you that life is still happening even when yours feels paused. That there is movement even in stillness. That there is music even in sorrow. Some mornings when I couldn't find a reason to get up, I would open the window just enough and wait. And the birds never missed a day. They arrived with no knowledge of my struggle, but every answer to it. Their rhythm became an anchor, not to productivity, not to responsibility, but to presence. To the simple truth that being here is enough. I started recognizing them not by name, but by tone. There was one that whistled slow, like it was thinking between notes. Another who repeated the same phrase over and over, like a mantra, a call to stay. And one who sang high and fast, like it had just remembered how to be free. They became companions in a way people couldn't be. They didn't ask, didn't need, didn't pull. They just offered song space sound. And sometimes that's what healing sounds like. Not silence, but softness. Not advice, but acknowledgement. Not a solution, but a presence. Years later, I still pause when I hear them. No matter how busy I am, how late I am, how tired I feel. Because their song was once the only thing that reached me. Before therapy, before words, before I could even name what was wrong. There was birdsong. It didn't change me, it didn't fix me. But it kept me company on mornings I thought I was alone. And for that I owe them more than I can say. Now I try to leave the window open at least a little. Not just for air, but for them. For the reminder, for the connection, for the sound of something that continues even when I pause. I don't know if birds know we hear them. I don't know if they care. But I like to believe that in some quiet way, they sing for the ones who need it most. For the ones who wake early not because they want to, but because they can't sleep. For the ones who sit in silence waiting for a sign that the world is still turning, that someone is still singing. And they are, into one. Even now, outside my window in a different city, a different life. They are still there, still singing, still reminding. That morning always comes, that music never really leaves, that even in loneliness, there is company in song. I never used to notice the smell of rain. I knew when it was coming, could feel the air change, could hear the thunder roll in from a distance, but the smell I didn't really notice. Until I did. It was after a long week, one of those stretches where nothing felt right, where my thoughts were too loud and my body too heavy. The kind of week where everything feels out of place, and so do you. Then it rained. Not hard, not loud, just steady like a hush laid gently over the world. And when it stopped, I stepped outside. Barefoot, tired, not expecting anything. And I smelled it. That deep, soft, earthy scent. Wet ground, damp leaves, mud, meeting light. And something inside me unlocked. I stood still as if that scent held a memory my mind had forgotten, but my body hadn't. It brought me back to the garden behind my grandmother's house, where I used to play after the rain. I would dig in the dirt with a stick, not building anything, just curious, just present. The world then was simple, honest, kind. And that smell on that day brought it all back. The scent of rain on soil is more than just a smell. It's a feeling, a presence, a reminder that something old and steady still exists. That beneath the noise of traffic and deadlines and disappointment, there is still earth. Still breathing, still holding us up, still remembering us even when we forget it. Since that day, I started noticing it more. That scent that arrives only after the storm, never before, never during. Only after, like a blessing for having made it through. There's something profound about that. That healing doesn't come with the rain, but after it, in the stillness, in the scent left behind. It made me think about all the storms I've carried. The ones no one saw, the ones I didn't name, the ones I tried to outwalk, outrun, outwork. And how after each one, there was always a moment when I stepped outside and the world smelled like survival. Like beginning again. Like forgiveness. It didn't erase the damage, didn't undo the loss, but it told me you're still here. And that's enough. Now when it rains, I wait for that moment. Not just for the clouds to pass, but for the earth to speak. Because that's what it feels like. Like the earth finally exhaling, finally saying, I'm glad you made it through. I remember one day after a loss so quiet, I didn't know how to mourn it. I walked for hours, aimless, empty, aching. And just before heading home, the sky broke open. I stood in it, not running, not caring, just letting it fall. And when it stopped, when the last drop landed, I breathed in, and there it was. That smell, and it held me the way no words could. Like it had waited specifically for me. I know it's just a scent, just a natural thing, just air and moisture and soil. But to me, it's something sacred. Because it arrives after the breaking, not during, not before. Only after showers, and sometimes that's when we need it most. Not when we're trying to be strong, but when we've stopped trying, when we're simply standing in what's left. That's when the ground speaks. Through scent, through memory, through quiet. It tells you you are allowed to begin again. That softness still exists, that your story isn't over, even if the page feels blank. Now every time it rains, I leave the window open just a crack enough to let it in. And when the air shifts, when that scent finds its way in, I close my eyes and breathe deep. And in that breath, there's something more than air. There's presence, there's peace, there's proof. That I've been through something, and I'm still standing. And somehow the earth knows. There wasn't a single moment I can point to. No flash of light, no sudden clarity, no breakthrough that split the sky open. Just a quiet noticing, a slow return, a gentle unfolding. It happened gradually like dawn. Not with noise, but with light soft, barely there, but real. It started with the wind. The way it showed up again and again, without asking for anything, without requiring me to be happy or whole or fixed. It didn't care if I was falling apart. It didn't try to hold me together. It just stayed, and that was the beginning. Then came the sunlight, resting on my shoulder not to warm me, but to remind me that I was still here, that there was still warmth even on days I couldn't feel it inside myself. That sunlight didn't ask me to move, didn't ask me to perform. It simply arrived and waited, and that was enough. Then the trees, always still, always present. They didn't lean in, they didn't try to understand, they didn't rush to speak. They just listened by existing. And in their silence, I heard myself again. Not the loud self, not the trying self, but the one underneath, the soft one. The one that remembered being small, being barefoot, being curious. And then the birds were sure. Their songs not for me, but with me. They didn't sing to save me, but their music pulled me back into rhythm, into breath, into a world that still had sound, still had beauty, still had life. And the scent of earth after rain, that one still brings tears, because it reminds me that I made it through something, even if no one knew. It reminds me that after every storm, the ground exhales, and so can I. Each of these things separate ordinary, but together they became something holy. A constellation of small graces that formed a map back to myself. And I followed it. Not quickly, not perfectly, but faithfully. Step by step, birdsong by birdsong, breeze by breeze. I began to remember that I didn't need to do anything to be loved by the earth. I didn't need to earn light or apologize for resting or explain why I was tired. The world outside my pain wasn't asking for a version of me I couldn't be. It just kept offering itself in pieces, in moments, in presence. And I slowly, softly began to say yes. Yes to sitting still. Yes to breathing again. Yes to being seen by trees. Yes to being sung to by birds. Yes to standing in the rain without needing it to stop. I began to realize that I had spent years waiting to be understood by people, by words, by something that would say, I see you, I get it. But the wind already had. The sunlight already had. The tree, the bird, the soil beneath my feet. They all saw me long before I knew how to ask for it. They didn't need me to be articulate, didn't need me to be strong, didn't need me to be anything other than what I was. They accepted the version of me that I couldn't even accept yet. And that was the beginning of everything. Because healing doesn't start with achievement. It starts with being allowed. Allowed to feel, allowed to fall apart, allowed to come back when I'm ready without being punished for taking too long. And nature understood that in a way people often don't. There is something sacred about being seen by something that doesn't ask you to be more, but gently reminds you that you've always been enough. Some mornings now I walk slower, not because I'm older, but because I've learned how to pay attention. I stop when I hear the birds. I look up at trees, I let the breeze move through me like memory. I open the window when it rains, so the scent can remind me that I'm still capable of beginning again. Because healing isn't about forgetting what hurt. It's about learning how to live, even with what you carry. It's about finding small spaces to breathe again, to believe again. Not in miracles, but in mornings. Not in fixing, but in feeling. Not in erasing the pain, but in making space around it. Soft space, quiet space, breathable space. And the wind, the light, the tree, the bird, the earth, they all offer that space freely, faithfully, forever. Now I know I was never alone. Not really. Even when I felt invisible, even when I couldn't speak, even when the world seemed to go on without me, there were still things that stayed. Still things that whispered, you're not gone, you're just tired. Come sit with us a while. And I did and I do. And I will. Yesurimonu. Because healing is not a destination. It's a rhythm, a remembering, a return. And every time I touch the wind, feel the warmth rest under a tree, hear a bird or breathe in the scent of rain, I come back to myself. Not a better version, not a newer one, just the truest one. The one who knows that even in the hardest seasons, there is still something that stays. And if I listen, if I'm quiet, if I'm willing, I will hear it say, welcome back. If I could write a letter to the version of me who once sat alone on back steps, on empty benches, in silent rooms, trying to hold everything together, I would start like this. You don't have to be strong right now. You don't have to understand any of it. You don't have to explain your silence. You don't have to justify why the tears come when they do, or why sometimes they don't come at all. You are not broken. You are not failing. You are simply carrying what was never meant to be carried alone. I know how much you hide, how carefully you fold yourself into something smaller so you don't take up too much space or too much attention. I know the weight you hold in your chest, the ache that follows you into dreams, the way your smile feels more like a shield than an invitation. I see you, and I know you don't want to be seen like this. But I see you anyway, not to judge, but to remind you, you are still here, and that matters. There is something I want to tell you, something I didn't know when I needed it most. You don't have to heal all at once. You don't have to arrive anywhere. You are allowed to take your time to fall apart quietly, to rebuild gently, to be a work in progress in full view of the sky. You are allowed to not know, to not be ready, to not be okay. And still, you are allowed to be loved. I know you feel alone, invisible, even as if the world forgot you, or worse, never really saw you to begin with. But listen, the wind remembers. The sunlight still rests on your shoulders. The trees haven't left. The birds still sing even when you can't. The earth still waits soft and steady after every storm. And all of them, every single one, have been loving you quietly while you search for answers in noise. I'm not asking you to believe me right now. I know how far away those words can feel. But I'm writing this so that one day when the world is quiet again, you might remember. There was always something that stayed. Even when people didn't. Even when understanding didn't come. Even when you felt like a ghost in your own life. There was still presence, still grace, still softness, waiting in the air, in the trees, in the sky, in the soil. And in you. Yes, even in you. I know you've been taught to chase value, to prove worth, to measure yourself against noise. But nature never asked that of you. Nature in its quiet brilliance only asked one thing. That you stay, not perfectly, not strongly, not loudly. Just for a stay, one breath at a time, one morning at a time, one small noticing at a time. Because even now, under the ache, under the tired, under the fear, there is something in you that remembers joy. Not the loud kind, not the kind you have to perform, but the kind that exists when your feet touch the grass, when your hands feel warmth, when your eyes close in birdsong. That joy is still yours, still reachable, still real. And the path to it is not paved with answers, but attention. So pay attention to the breeze, to the light, to the stillness of trees, to the sound of wings, to the scent of wet earth, to the way your heart softens when you stop trying so hard. Pay attention not to fix, but to feel. Pay attention because this moment, this breath, this quiet returning is sacred. And so are you. I know that sounds hard to believe. I know you've carried shame like it was part of your skin. I know you've walked through rooms feeling like a burden just by being there. But that was never the truth. You are not a burden. You are not too much. You are not too late. You are here, and that is a miracle. You are here, and that is enough. Let yourself rest now. Let yourself soften. You don't have to hold the world anymore. You don't have to carry the silence alone. There is space for you in this world, in this day, in this breath. There is space for the quiet you, the tender you, the real you. And no matter how far you feel, you are never too far to come home. So come home. Come home to yourself, to your breath, to the earth beneath your feet, to the sky above your head, to the quiet love that has never left you. You are allowed to return again and again and again. And when you do, I will be here, waiting with open arms and no expectations. Only this: welcome back. I missed you, and I'm so glad you're here.